Welcome back to the Chase MedSearch podcast. Summer is a great time for actual reading, not scrolling. And today's guest has written a book that might change how you think about work, science, and your soul. So, definitely worthy of that summer reading list. Brian Cranley is a top medical device sales leader with a background in biomedical engineering and theology. Yes, theology. And now he's the author of The Call of Wonder, a compelling exploration of how science and faith might not be at odds after all, but actually made for each other. Welcome to the podcast, Brian.
Thank you, Jordan. Great to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
It's exciting to talk to you in a different context because I always try to recruit you for some new job all the time, nonstop, and you're always doing too well. So I got you recruited for this. How about that?
Love it. Happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. Tell us about your journey into medical device sales. Our audience is very interested in that. So let's begin at the beginning there.
Yeah, so I've had kind of a winding path, as you know, as we've discussed. I started out in college at Texas A&M, and I was planning to go pre-med. So I did biomedical engineering as a bachelor's because I just personally liked physics. I liked science, and I'm a strategy guy, so I figured if I ended up not going to med school, I would have a degree to fall back on, which is exactly what happened. Engineering was super tough, so I had to drop the pre-med. And after A&M, I went to work at a company called Cyberonics, which is now LivaNova. Craig Dagenet worked there with me. And so it was a great intro to med device, but I went there as an engineer, and it was a small company. So when the sales reps would go on vacation, they would have us go cover cases like a clinical specialist. So that was my introduction to medical device at all. And when I went out there, I loved it. I loved being with the patients. I loved being with the doctors, with the people. And I hated the engineering part. So I learned in 1 year that I did not want to be an engineer, but I enjoyed the education. So after about a year and a half at Cyberonics, I felt something of a higher calling and decided to go into the seminary for 5 years, I think. So I did philosophy for 2 years and then theology for 3 years, and did that full time, and decided it was Catholic seminary. So I decided not to go through with ordination, and I left. And when I came out, I called up my buddy Craig, and he had moved to Medtronic, and he helped me get my first job in the neuromod pain space. And so I was Medtronic in Fort Worth, Texas for, 5.5 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nevro came along, and I switched and moved to San Antonio, did that for 2 years, and then came back to Fort Worth with Nevro, and I've been here since. So kind of a winding journey, but what that gave me was a lot of time to think about science and faith and sales, which are my three favorite things. So
yeah, that's great. I learned a lot about you right there that I didn't know.
Yeah.
How have you thrived at such a high level for so long in Fort Worth? I mean, people who know you, I kind of joke around, you're known as the mayor of Fort Worth in Neuromod. you have achieved extraordinary results at a sustained level for a long time. How have you done that? What do you attribute that to?
Well, thank you for that, first of all. I attribute it to tailoring sales to my personality. Like I never thought of going into sales. I was engineering, medicine, all that, and learning from the best. I mean, I took my time to get here. I was a clinical specialist for 5.5 years at Medtronic, and then for a full year at Nevro before I ever even went to the sales side. So that gave me the opportunity to work with people like Neil Doherty and Robin Adams and a lot of people that were just excellent at sales. And so I got to watch for a long time. I got to build relationships. I got to learn from so many good people, so many good managers over the years. And I took my time. And so I kind of learned how to sell based on my personality. And I took that. I didn't try to, I guess, rush it. I think that was my secret. And so by the time I came back to Fort Worth, I already knew the doctors. I had the relationships established, and learning how I sell was kind of the key for me. And I've tried to stay true to that ever since. So it's not easy. It's a grind, but I still love it. It's a fun world to be a part of.
That's great. Well, we're not interviewing for a job, so I can ask you about your faith background.
Yeah.
You said you went to a Catholic seminary. Were you raised Catholic, or what is the roots of your faith?
Yeah, raised Catholic. Um, I fell away for a little bit in high school, I would say. Most people fall away in college, but I kind of came back to it in college, then fell away again after college, and I kind of went back and forth. In seminary, obviously, I was all about it, and then fell away a little bit after that. And so I've been kind of going back and forth, but because I've studied so much of Catholic theology, I think it's kind of ingrained in me. But one thing I did appreciate about the Catholic seminary background was they gave us Jewish philosophy, Jewish theology. They gave us Islamic theology and philosophy, which I include in the book because I try to include the things that we share in common. A lot of which comes from Greek philosophy also. So I've had a lot of exposure to different faiths. A lot of friends, obviously, who are Protestant Christian, and a lot of good things there. So, I've had a lot of exposure, but I grew up Catholic. My dad's super Catholic, so he kind of kept us close to that road. And then after I studied it myself, I just like some of the ancient thinkers there.
Hmm. How do you balance? I mean, we'll talk about this maybe throughout, but how do you balance being a performer at such a high level, leading the team that you lead, because I know you've got other people working under you, and then becoming an author? How on earth do you find the time? You're driving millions of dollars in revenue in your spare. I mean, this is not a spare time project, it would seem like. How did you do it?
Yeah. Again, took a lot of time, so I talk about this. It started out as a hobby, and it really started out as an idea that I just couldn't get rid of. And Ryan Holiday and Tim Ferriss talk about how do you know when you should write a book? And their answer is when the pain of writing a book is greater than the pain of keeping an idea inside. And so I said, based on all the habits, things we learn, small steps every day, consistency, I tried to apply that to writing. And so I just started writing it was 30 minutes, 3 times a week, and outlined it. And it took forever. I mean, this book has a lot of research in it. So I had to go back and research things I had learned, 10 plus years ago. So took a lot of time each day. I mean, a little bit of time for a lot of days. So it took me 4 years to write it for about 30 or 40 minutes, 3 or 4 days a week in the morning. And I didn't rush it again, took my time, and then it took me another year and a half to edit it. So I think depending on your timeline, if you're busy, you can set aside a little bit of time each day, which is what I did, and it can end up leading to a whole book somehow.
Yeah, and I'll hold up the book for those of you on YouTube. This
Yeah.
is the book. This is The Call of Wonder, and coming out in August, I think,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Yep. August 5th.
Absolutely. And they say you should never talk religion or politics at work, but today we're going to break one of those rules and we're going to lean into it. I personally think it's kind of overdue to break that rule. Why did you feel like this book had to be written? You said the pain got to a point, possibly where you just got to do it, right?
Yeah.
Was there a personal moment behind it that sparked it?
Yeah, great question. So I'll tell you the moment that the idea that started the book happened. It was right here at my place in Fort Worth. I just came home from work one day and was looking to relax, and I watched a YouTube video on the origins of the universe. So the first moment of the Big Bang from a particle accelerator lab in Chicago. And they were talking about the first moment of the Big Bang, and there's a new theory where all the forces of physics, the 4 forces, were unified together as one force. And so the way they described the science of the first moment of the Big Bang sounded exactly like how the ancient philosophers had described God in my old philosophy classes. And I thought, man, that's strange. I wonder if, there's a correlation there. Maybe God wrote his image into science somehow. And so that began an internet search basically to see if anyone had said this and who'd said it, because I just wanted to learn more about it. And after about 6 months of kind of looking for it, no one had said it. And the idea just kept with me all day long, every day. And so finally I said, well, I hate writing, but I'm going to write it down and see where it goes. And it led to just more really cool conclusions, which, you've read some of the book, but that first kind of aha moment is what started it off.
Fantastic. Um, you know, who's the audience for the book? Who did you write this for? Is it the rep out there, or the sales manager that's skeptical? Is it someone that's kind of strayed from the faith? And what would you say?
Um, I would say, and they teach you this in publishing and marketing, is that you're supposed to write for a particular person.
Mhm.
So you're supposed to have a target reader in mind. And so my target reader was the person who has left their faith because of a love of science, like an authentic love of science, and the belief that the two are incompatible. So in our society today, faith and science are kind of often posed, not always, but they're often posed as polar opposites. They're incompatible forever and always, and there's no way to reconcile them. But throughout history, this conversation's been going on, and there's been people on both sides of that. And so my target reader is the person who authentically feels like they can't believe in God because whatever image of God they were given growing up is irrational, basically, or it just does the old man floating in the clouds who's judging you for everything you do. So that's the person. I wanted to provide them with a summary of the education that I got that really helped me have reasons to believe that I just can't forget. Like once they're in your head, like Aristotle's unmoved mover argument or Plato's highest good argument. These are just logical arguments from philosophy. They're not even specifically religious. But once you hear those arguments, you have, a rational basis for faith. So I wanted to provide that for people so that at least they could feel like it's logical to believe in God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe following on with that, what can a hard-charging medical device rep gain from a book about wonder and a book about God? What do you think?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, medical device is extremely grinding, and it can,
Oh yeah.
destroy your soul at times. But I titled the book "The Call of Wonder" because, it sounds a little cheesy at first, the call of wonder. But I tried to outline what I mean by wonder in chapter 1, which is not your imagination. Kids use their imagination to think of things. It's not the wonder from social media or CGI movies where it's a dopamine hit. It's excitement that fades really quick. But I wanted to return to authentic wonder, which is a combination of like philosophical inquiry, thinking about the world around you. I believe it's the experience of the mind when it experiences God. So it's sort of like this common experience to philosophers, theologians, and scientists. It's what makes even an atheist scientist continue to study outer space. It's whatever it is in our intellect that continually calls us on. That's what I wanted to title the book, something about an experience of what it's like to look into these things, because I think that real mystery is what renews the mind. And so I found as a medical device rep, when you're thinking about your quota constantly and you can't stop thinking about, man, I got to hit it again this quarter, and it just never stops. When you have these things to think about, it's almost like an immediate reset for your mind, and it kind of renews your mind throughout the day. Oh yeah, there's bigger things out there. It puts things in perspective. I don't have to, stress my entire life away. The universe is going to go on. So it's kind of like a mental health thing, honestly. I was trying to kind of offer it like as a mental health help, at least for people.
Yeah. Well, it definitely is that. And it had that effect on me in several parts. I love the tour de force that you kind of take us through, drawing on philosophy and science and monotheistic religions and many of the things you've studied, and you make it accessible, which I really liked, because I'm learning about things that I didn't really pay much attention to in terms of philosophy when I had to take it in college. But one literary device that you use in the book is Sophia. Sophia is at the front of many of your chapters, and she's taking the reader or the person that's narrating the book on a journey. And I thought that was a wonderful device. I don't know if that's been used before. Where did that idea come to you from? And I think Sophia means wisdom, right? Isn't that a Greek term?
Yeah. So Sophia is wisdom, and particularly the Eastern Orthodox Christians have kind of personified her as sort of like, not like a being, but just this idea that wisdom is a thing in itself. And so, Yeah, I use Sophia. That's a kind of an ancient tool, but I used her as a fable to kind of guide the reader through each chapter, mostly because I'm a big experience guy, and I know that the content in the chapter bodies is pretty dense in some parts. It's a lot of philosophy in the beginning. It's a lot of science in the second half. And so I wanted to give people a mental break, but I also wanted to somehow accentuate the experience of learning these things, at least how I felt when I learned them. And the opening fable is Sophia welcoming you into an office building where the philosophers, the theologians, and the scientists are all gathered, and you're basically the meeting scribe for the big meeting. And by the end of the night, you're happy to be there because you experienced the wonder of it all. So thank you. I'm glad you appreciate that. I actually had a few people recommend taking the fables out. Some early publishers, before I even wrote them, I had just one barely written.
Mhm.
But I personally liked it, so I left it in, and I get mixed critique on them, but most people seem to like them, and some people love them, so
Yeah.
I like them.
No, it's good.
But I think it gives you a mental break for the book.
Yeah, it's a nice mix in there. You talk about Plato's forms, and it hit me. It just sparked a thought in me that a lot of times the conversations I'm having as a medical recruiter with reps is because there's a deep dissonance between how they think of themselves as people, essentially good people, and then sometimes what they're being asked to do at work. And that those two don't always line up in their head. And a lot of times that's sometimes the impetus for why they're looking for a new job. It's not necessarily money, it's how they feel at the end of the day about what they do. Can
Yeah.
this book help that kind of rep navigate their journey in medical sales, do you think?
That's a great question. I think it can, in the sense that, like I said before, once you have some of these ideas from philosophy, it's very hard to forget them.
Mm-hmm.
And the first half of the book is really just the summary of the conversation of Western civilization. Like, these are the big thinkers that shaped Western civilization. So I would say yes. I mean, when you get to Aristotle, I didn't put this part in the book, but when you get to Aristotle, who is the student of Plato, he talks about the virtue lies between two extremes. And, often there's a vice on one side and there's a vice on the other, and the virtue lies in the middle. But when you have this sort of formation in philosophy, I think it can help you judge each situation you're in as a med device rep. I think it gives you a stronger foundation from which to judge each situation that you're in. So, yeah, I think it can help. But maybe some of the other writings of Plato and Aristotle than the ones I put in my book. So, yeah, if you read it and you like it, they wrote a heck of a lot more. So there's plenty out there to get into.
Rather prolific authors. Have you ever felt
Yeah.
that tension yourself as a medical rep? Maybe not at your current job, but just in general. Does your worldview help you resolve potential conflicts or tensions between how you think of yourself and what you do?
Yeah. I mean, most of us who have been here long enough know there's tons of gray area in medical device.
There is.
So, yeah. And I've definitely crossed the line before on both sides. And so I guess it helps put things in perspective and help you just kind of prioritize. What do you want?
Mhm.
How important is the next P Club? How important is growing a territory the right way or the fast way or whatever that is, in each given situation? The doctor wants to use me for this reason. Is that in line with my priorities and my principles, or is it out of line? And sometimes, I think sometimes people get to a place where they have to walk away from some really tempting things,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've definitely experienced it in my life.
You're a medical device rep with an undergraduate degree in biomedical engineering from Texas A&M. Texas A&M, for those in the wider audience, that is an amazing engineering school. I mean, that is a hard engineering school to get through. Someone that made it through told me they spend the first year trying to wash you out. So you've got the bona fides from a engineering, science, and all that standpoint. Now you're in medical. Have you, as a medical rep, ever seen in science and in advancements of medical technology something that just makes you step back and say, wow, this is God at work here. This is an amazing technology. This is an amazing advancement. What about the personal wonder for you that brings it home in the job that you do?
Gosh, another great question. Yeah, the personal wonder. I love being around medicine and technology, that combination. People said, why did you go to seminary and why did you want to be a doctor and why are you a device rep? Because they seem so disconnected. But the reality is I like tech and I love healing, like the idea of healing people. And so ministers, pastors do that spiritually, doctors do that physically. But one thing I also love about med device sales is apart from, my education, these are just some of the most impressive people I've ever been around. And it's like the opportunity to be with professional athletes and, lawyers and chiropractors, just people that are driven and so impressive. And so just to be around this type of person for this long, I feel so blessed in that sense to have a great education from places like Texas A&M and the University of St. Thomas, but also just a life education from even people like yourself, Jordan. I mean, it's just impressive to be around these kind of people and the physicians we get to work with. So it kind of keeps you on your toes, the competitive environment. You can't let yourself slack. And I love that you're always kind of held accountable and you're always driving to get better. So I want to provide people who are already trying to drive to get better some intellectual stimulation to kind of help them reset their mind and get better intellectually.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Podcast is a great format to tell stories. And is there any story you have of anything you've seen in your career that just sort of defies explanation? That you look at it and step back and say, in my life, I've seen some things, and this is something that just, when I ask that question, that comes to mind. Anything like that out there that's wonder evoking?
Well, I can relate it to my current territory where I'm at right now. I just remember I was down in San Antonio with Nevro, doing really well. I mean, we were doing really well down there. And then somebody asked me to come help with, making some introductions back in Fort Worth. And I came up here to make some introductions, and some of the doctors are my good friends, and they were like, well, why don't you come back? Why don't you come back? And I just remember thinking, I can never come back. It's 4 hours away. Oh. But there was a second rep position open, and they had like 3 candidates. And, these jobs are coveted.
Oh, yeah.
And the 3 candidates fell through at the very last minute, like all 3 times. And so each time they would call me and be like, hey, it fell through again. And these are like really good candidates, really good job. So finally, after the 3rd time, I was like, maybe that's where I'm supposed to be. And I came up here, gave it a real thought and tremendous sense of peace. Like, okay, this feels right. This maybe God's leading me back here to Fort Worth. And that sort of, I guess, discernment or sensation has stayed with me the entire time I've been here. And, like you were saying, to be able to do this for a long time, it's hard if you're, I guess, just not in the right headspace or not in the right place, grinding it out. But it feels like it's been smoother for, I don't know, maybe it's a divine reason, maybe it's not. But it does feel like it was kind of prepared for me and it was ready when I got here, which is pretty cool. So
that's very cool. Yeah. It's like every now and then something happens in your life that you just can't really put my finger on that. But that we just had that experience in Boston. We were there for my daughter's college visits. So we're at a school, and we wrapped up the visit with a basketball coach, and we just stepped into the bookstore to buy some swag, I call it, like a golf shirt or whatever. And the girl behind the counter said, did you say you're from Texas? And we said, yeah. And she goes, where? We said, San Antonio. And she said, I'm from San Antonio. And she asked my daughter, where'd you go to school? And she said, well, St. Mary's Hall. And she goes, I went to St. Mary's Hall. Wow. And she had graduated like maybe 2 years before. But I started trying to tell my wife and daughter later, like, do you know the odds of that she would be at that bookstore at the exact same time? And she doesn't even go to school there anymore. She graduated. She's just working back, and that was the time she happened to be there. And our school is not very big, and Boston is very big. I mean, what are the odds of that? But anyway,
very low odds. Yeah, very low odds.
Personal experience there that made me stop and think. One of the ancient ideas that you touch on is the idea of, I think I'm saying this right, telos, or
Yeah.
purpose, end, aim. How do you find that that idea, whether they would call it that or not, shows up in the motivations of some of the best reps that you've ever been around or worked with? Do you kind of see that every now and then in folks? And I didn't give you any of these questions in advance.
That's a really deep
Not trying
question. We're gonna mix
trying to-
telos with reps.
this is what I think about when I read books like this. I'm like,
Yeah, I mean the connections. That's what I like too, making connections. Telos, for people listening, is from Aristotle, and it's sort of like things have a purpose in mind. And so a lot of the ancients saw the biological world and said things like, well, animals seem perfectly suited for their environment, so there must have been an intelligent designer who made them that way. And then atheists, who kind of grabbed onto Charles Darwin's idea that the environment shapes animals over millions of years and without any purpose. It's just sort of this random process. Tried to argue against the teleological argument. So that's the idea of telos, and I think it still has a powerful place today. But in reps in medical device, I think, like we talked about, these people they want to become this just excellent professional. And so the idea of becoming what you are, your best potential, as Aristotle's, that's where telos comes from. And a lot of people have that idea today in modern philosophy, but he had it way back then that, a virtuous human is someone he believed they were good at rhetoric. They acted with virtue. They could speak well. They could convince people. And I mean, that's pretty much the description of a great med device rep. So I definitely think as a person, the best reps talk about it's who you are. It's not what you do.
Mm-hmm.
It's your processes, it's your relationships, and it's who you are and your personal belief about yourself. And yes, the telos of a virtuous human, I think, is extremely, maybe the most powerful thing for a rep to kind of work on that aspect.
Yeah, it added up to me because I'm in a bookstore at the airport, and about half of it is books on sales and books on improving your sales process and becoming a better salesperson. And it just seems like the best people that I've known over the years that are always at the top of the charts, so to speak, have this inner drive or inner motivation to become as good as they possibly can be. They're just almost obsessed with it, in terms of getting better and sharpening the saw. So if they've got extra time at the airport, they're going to buy a book and they're going to read it because they might get something, a nugget. Most of them say, I got a nugget out of that, and this is what I'm going to do with it. So,
and
anyway.
Let me add something to that. We were talking earlier about Aristotle said that virtue lies between two extremes. In the American society, we are extreme production and extreme habits and extreme how much can I produce, and my value lies in what I accomplish. So I would say I spent probably 4 years on my commutes listening to all books about sales and business and mindset. And after a while, I kind of started losing some of the depth. And so I would just, switch in some of these philosophy theology books to add that depth to it and some fiction as well. But I think it is important to point out that, yes, it is helpful to become the best person you can be. But if you go too far to that extreme, then the mindset shifts to I'm only as valuable as what I can produce. And, then you go too far. And I would say Aristotle would say you go too far. And so life is also about family and living. And I think, figuring out the universe and stuff like that. So a good balance, I think, is also healthy.
That's a helpful guardrail there. I like that.
Yeah,
that's true. You can tip over on the other side. Some of your book, and it seems like some of the premise of your book is that science and faith are not enemies. They're not at odds with each other. They can be reconciled. Why do you think so many people have this notion that if you're going to be a true, I don't know, pure, if you will, scientist or rational person, then you have to discard this irrational belief in God?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it comes from the noisy extremes. Again, we'll go to the two extremes. So you have the conversation out there right now is on one extreme, people like Answers in Genesis, where it's young Earth creation. The Earth is only 6,000 to 10,000 years old, and you're interpreting Genesis super literal. Well, if you're an authentic scientist who studies geology or evolutionary biology or the light from distant stars, you have a really hard time accepting that. And so, then the other loud side is the materialist, atheist, Richard Dawkins, and these guys who are basically arguing against that other extreme.
Mm-hmm.
So what I tried to present is the middle ground between the two, where throughout history, a lot of these philosophers interpreted certain books of scripture, parts, metaphorically and allegorically. And when you do that, it opens a whole new venue for this synthesis. But also, people of faith, when they see these rational arguments for God, a lot of people have never heard these before. And so it requires some openness on both sides. And I really wanted to challenge both sides to find a middle ground. But I think it's absolutely fascinating, like when you do look at the middle ground and you're open to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you make a really good point in the earlier part of your book that non-physical things can be real. And you make a point that we know what courage and humility look like. It takes a human being to put those into action, right? But at the same time, math and physics are very, very real. You just can't touch them or hold them in your hand. And I thought that was so interesting. Can you kind of elaborate on that or expound on that a little bit?
I'm glad you found that interesting, because that is the starting point. If you want to try to prove God's existence, I think you have to prove that anything non-physical, immaterial, that something immaterial can be real. And where do you see that?
Yeah.
Philosophers always talk about math and physics. The laws of physics were discovered. They weren't invented. So they've been here. And then you have, like we talked about, virtue, and I didn't put it in the book, but this whole moral conscience that everyone deals with. An atheist materialist will say, well, morality is just a construct of society. What we all agree upon is best for the greatest number of people. But in reality, is that really the experience that every single person on earth is going through when they deal with morality? And when you make a ton of bad choices and you're absolutely depressed and you feel terrible, like why? That shouldn't happen if there's no, real soul or real conscious or some moral agent out there. And so, I'm glad you talked about that. And Plato was the first one to really make a case for the immaterial forms, truth, beauty, goodness, courage. These are real things that have existence. And then the conversation from there moves to, well, where do they have existence? Where do they exist? Just in our minds, or are they floating around in some world? And so that's where the book takes it. But that's ultimately the starting point for the logical basis for God. If there's anything that can exist, then there's a possibility for a God to exist too.
Yeah, no, that's great. Do you think, maybe I asked this earlier, do you think that having such a coherent worldview, just yourself personally or people that that also have one, gives you, and this is kind of crass, but a competitive edge in sales? Do you think that is part of your being successful, intertwined with having levels of success that some people don't ever achieve in their career? Is that helpful?
I would say 100%. So the combination of feeling like this is the place I'm supposed to be right now, combined with these, this information that I have in my brain, I use throughout the day, like we said, to calm down, to gain perspective. And so it's really hard to rattle me at this point in the stage in my career, just because I've been doing it for so long. So there's some habits built up. There's some processes in place that I know work. But more than that, if I lost it all tomorrow, it's not the most important thing, and I know how to go back out and meet people and talk and, start a whole new career as an author, whatever it is. So it definitely keeps you calm, and it keeps you happy. I mean, and customers want to be around a rep who is, in a good place. So I think it's definitely a competitive edge.
Fantastic. Your book just lightly touches on the concept of a worthy rival. And I wanted to relate this to you. You have been a force, as we mentioned, in Fort Worth for a long time. Have you ever had a worthy rival? Who sharpened you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Every one of the main competitive companies, Abbott, Medtronic, and Boston, have fantastic reps, and Saluda.
Mhm.
And I know all those people because if you're here for any amount of time, then you kind of get to know each other.
Yeah.
I'd say all of them, because there are accounts I cannot get into because I know this person's there.
Yeah.
Or, and vice versa. And there's some they can't get into because I'm there. And so you get to a level where you just respect your competitor. There's this balance of wanting to win all the business in the city, but, very few reps can do that, besides a couple that I know of. But, it's just really hard to win all the business and take it all. And so, you can the worthy rival mentality is, and that's from Simon Sinek. And his other book is The Infinite Game, which is a fantastic idea that the game never ends. And it applies to med device. Like, your territory building never ends, and your managers are going to go through, they're going to keep going through, but your competitors aren't going to lose all their business tomorrow. And so you're going to inch above each other and slowly grow. But you're always going to have that competitive edge. And so, yeah, I respect my competitors, and I think that's healthy. But I still try to take as much business as I can where I can.
Absolutely.
That keeps it fun, though.
How did your customers receive your book? Has anyone read it or looked at it, talked to you about it? What have their reactions been?
Yeah, I've made a lot of my customers read it because I've been talking about it forever. It's taken so long to come out. Everybody's tired of hearing about it. What was I going to say? Yeah, it's been interesting. When I first started writing the book, I thought about using a pen name, and I looked into that because, I'm in med device, and my whole persona is med device. And it was really difficult. I talked to a friend of mine, and I was like, what do you think? Should I use a pen name? And they were like, no, pen names are for already famous authors who want to write in a separate genre. Like, that's who a pen name's for, not a no-name nobody who wants to go by a different name.
Okay.
And, they just kind of confronted me and said, it's maybe just your pride talking. You don't want to let this side out of you. And that stuck with me, for a long time. I was like, you know what? It is just my pride. There's this side of me that a lot of people don't know about. And so I'm now out there pushing it, selling it, using my sales skills to get it out there. But it's been fantastic. I mean, everybody thinks about this stuff. It's not like Brian's the only one that's thinking about it. Everybody thinks about it because it's, the big questions of life. So it's been awesome getting it out there to my customers and opening up new conversations. It's been very helpful. And, even other med device reps that share, a couple atheists have, contacted me about some of my online posts, and that's led to really good conversations. So it's just opened up a whole new level of conversation with a lot of different people.
Yeah, that's fantastic, because I imagine your customer base is very diverse when it comes to theology and ethnic background and all kinds of different things and experiences they've had.
Yeah.
That's interesting. How have your coworkers reacted to it?
Coworkers have been super supportive because,
Right.
they've kind of banded behind me to help me launch this thing. So they've taken up the case coverage when I need to be on a podcast or something like that. But they've been phenomenal. They also have all read it and are commenting, and so that's opened up discussions with our team as well. It's been really cool.
Yeah, that's great. The medical device community, I have never found to be anything but supportive of people that want to do their own endeavor. Personally, when I launched this business 13 years ago, I had so many people coming out of the woodwork to support and want to work with me. It was amazing, and I've never
That's
forgotten.
awesome.
Yeah, very grateful for it. Maybe a last question. You know a great deal about other religions. You know a lot about philosophy. You know a lot about Judaism and Islam. You've studied it. Why are you a Christian? Why are you a Catholic Christian? What is it about that aspect of theology that draws you or has convinced you that to put your feet there?
Well, that's a great question, which I address very briefly near the end of the book. The reason why I am a Christian is for continuity, and I would love the chance to explain that. So Catholic Christianity and, pretty much all Christianity sees Christianity as a completion and fulfillment of Judaism and not a cancellation of Judaism. And I've always loved that. So, the God's chosen people, the Exodus and Moses, and then the foretold Messiah is Christians believe is Christ coming. Well, if you read my book, I talk about these miracles of science. So you have the Big Bang, you have life that starts from non-living matter, and the miracle of the human mind, which just surpasses anything in the animal kingdom. And what I talk about there is kind of a new look at miracles in general. And I've been thinking about this a lot. I want to say now that a miracle is like a supernatural effect that utilizes a natural means. So if you think Jesus rubbing mud on the blind man's eye, turning his body into bread, or bread into his body and wine into his blood, he uses water for baptism. He's always taking something from the natural world to enact his miracles. And after writing the book on the miracles of science, I thought, oh my goodness, it's almost like God is repeating the refrain of Genesis over and over. This is good. This is good. And so there's a continuity between the miracles of Jesus and the miracles of science. And they have this crazy similarity, which I didn't realize till I wrote the book. But now it's really strengthened my belief in Christianity. So not only does it fulfill Judaism, but if he really is the Word, the Logos that created the world, then his miracles, while he's incarnate in the world, should have that exact same quality about them. And I feel like they do. They have the exact same quality as the Big Bang, the beginning of life, and then his miracles in the world. And so there's this beautiful continuity all the way back to Judaism, but now all the way back to the beginning of space and time. Mic drop.
Absolutely, Mike. Brian, thank you, not just for writing The Call of Wonder, but for showing us all that excellence in business and depth of thought don't have to be at odds. And for our listeners, if you're a rep grinding it out for the next quarter, a manager building your team, or just someone trying to make sense of how science, faith, and purpose all fit together, you don't have to compartmentalize those things. Brian's work reminds us that curiosity, wonder, and even doubt can be bridges, not barriers. You don't have to compartmentalize your intellect, your integrity, your career, or your convictions. So if you've ever felt that tension between who you are at work and who you are in your soul, maybe this book and this conversation is a call to wonder for you. So thanks for listening. And if this episode sparked something in you, share it with someone you respect. And as always, you can find more in the show notes. We'll link to Brian's book and past episodes of Chase MedSearch podcast on our website at chasemedsearch.com. Brian, thank you for being on.
Thank you so much, Jordan.